Money can't buy family loyalty. That's something I learned the hard way. My story begins with my grandfather's final act of protection, leaving his entire company to me instead of my unpredictable parents. You see, my parents' marriage was never about love. It was a business arrangement, cold and calculated from the start. Having me? Just another box checked off their corporate strategy. Growing up, I rarely saw them. While my grandfather raised me with care and wisdom, my parents lived separate lives, each chasing their own adventures and desires. I never really minded. How can you miss something you never had? After my grandfather passed, I did what any disinterested heir would do: secured my position in the boardroom, handed the daily operations to the management team, and set off to enjoy life. 6 months of freedom, that's all I got. When I finally returned home, I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped through the door. The nanny's face said it all. She looked like someone carrying a secret too heavy to hold. I didn't need to ask. My parents were up to their old tricks again. The voices drifting from the dining room drew me in, and what I found there was like walking into a bizarre family drama. 5 people sat around our dining table, and the scene before me was almost comical. There was my father, playing the role of the distinguished gentleman despite his well-known reputation as a womanizer. Beside him sat a young woman in her 20s, her face a haunting echo of his long-lost first love. My mother, maintaining her facade of elegance despite her wild nature, had outdone herself this time. She'd brought home not one, but 2 young men, both barely in their 20s. The newcomers were attractive, I'll give them that. But what caught my attention were their eyes. When they met my gaze, there was no warmth, no attempt at familial connection, just challenging stares that screamed their true intentions. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, and I knew right then that my peaceful days of collecting dividends were about to become a lot more complicated. My father had apparently adopted the daughter of his dead first love, while my mother had somehow acquired 2 illegitimate children. It was just like them to complicate everything. They were experts at this game, attacking when necessary, defending when cornered, and always looking out for their own interests. This time, though, their target was clear: my inheritance. What they didn't realize was that their schemes might finally awaken something in me, a side of my personality they'd never seen before. After all, I might have inherited more than just my grandfather's company. I might have inherited his cunning too. The dining room crackled with tension as my mother's saccharine welcome broke the silence. "George, you're back! Quick, sit down and eat." She rose from her chair, playing the role of the doting mother she'd never been. I watched with amusement as she pulled out a chair, as if 6 months of absence could be smoothed over with this simple gesture. My father couldn't resist taking his shot. "Gone for so long, and you can't even say hello?" He raised an eyebrow, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did your grandfather teach you any manners at all?" I met his gaze directly. "Did you think I was food?" I replied coldly, watching their reactions. "That you could just eat me up?" The nanny, sensing the rising tension, hurried over with a bowl of water for my hands, her movements quick and nervous. That's when Alex, my mother's eldest new son, decided to join the fray. "Is that how you show respect to your father?" His voice carried that self-righteous tone of someone who'd just joined a family but acted like he owned it. Ben, not to be outdone by his brother, chimed in with pseudo-psychology. "I heard you have extreme macho syndrome. What a piece of work you are, coming home just to feed your father garbage." I had to chuckle at their attempts to sound sophisticated with terms they barely understood. I turned my attention to Lily, my father's supposed ward. She was beautiful in that fragile, innocent way that made you want to protect her. Or in my case, use her to prove a point. When she caught my intense stare, she quickly lowered her head like a frightened deer sensing danger. My father's fist crashed against the table. "You're asking for it!" he roared, seeing how I looked at Lily. I smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. Are you absolutely sure she's not your daughter, Dad? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Of course not. The mention of Sarah, my father's greatest what if, gave me the perfect opening. You know, Dad, we shouldn't carry the regrets of your generation into ours. I leaned forward, my smile widening. Lily's quite lovely. How about I make her my wife? The chaos that followed was exactly what I'd hoped for. My father's face drained of color faster than wine from a spilled glass. Lily, poor thing, looked ready to burst into tears, her eyes rimming red. But the real show came from Alex, who slammed his bowl onto the table with enough force to make the silverware dance. Are you looking for death? Alex shot to his feet, pointing at me like an angry prosecutor. Do you have any idea how long I've been pursuing Lily? Well, wasn't this interesting? My mother's illegitimate son had set his sights on my father's first love's daughter. The irony was almost too perfect. I turned to my mother, my voice dripping with mock concern. Aren't you going to control your son? The dining room had become a theater of the absurd, and I was the only one who seemed to be enjoying the show. After all, what's a family dinner without a little chaos? My mother's awkward chuckle cut through the tension like a dull knife. George, sweetie, she tried to smooth things over, her smile as fake as her concern. Alex liked Lily first. Please don't cause trouble. For Mom's sake? Before I could respond, Ben jumped to his feet, chest puffed up like a peacock. Mom, don't lower yourself to beg him, he sneered. He might have played king while we were gone, but those days are over. Now that we're here, he'll learn his place. Alex, apparently emboldened by his brother's bravado, decided to show his hand. Forget about Lily for now. Let's talk business. You need to arrange positions for us at the company. I'll take general manager, and my brother can be deputy. The casual way he spoke about my company made my grandfather's last words echo in my head. I remembered that final moment, his weathered hand gripping mine with surprising strength. Keep the company in your hands, he'd warned, his voice barely a whisper. Your heartless parents will leave you with nothing if you don't. Now, watching these newcomers try to carve up my inheritance, I understood exactly what he meant. Sure, I'll arrange it, I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. If they'd stuck to childish games, I might have ignored them. But trying to steal what my grandfather protected? That crossed a line. I'm going to my room to rest, I announced, standing up. My parents visibly relaxed, probably thinking they'd won this round. Their relief was premature. Did I fucking let you go? Alex's voice cracked like a whip. I turned slowly, raising an eyebrow. What's the matter? Something else on your mind? Alex exploded, his face red with anger. You're just a bad person, George. You have extreme macho syndrome. You can't manage the company, but we brothers are extremely capable. Hand over the shares to us. I looked at my mother, my voice dangerously calm. Mom, did you teach him these lines? George, please, she forced a sad smile. Do me a favor. It's not easy for me either. Their earlier probing had been a test, and now, thinking they had me figured out, they were getting bold. Too bold. I smiled, placing my hand on the table. If it's difficult for you, I let the words hang in the air for a moment, then don't bother saying anything at all. In one fluid motion, I flipped the heavy dining table. Dishes crashed, soup flew, and screams filled the air. Only the housekeeper remained calm, probably used to such displays by now. People whisper about my extreme macho syndrome, but they don't understand. My grandfather taught me a crucial lesson. In this family, if you're not ruthless enough, they'll eat you alive. The violence isn't random, it's a message. Let them think I'm unstable. Let them believe I'm just a thug with anger issues. It's easier that way. Sometimes, the best way to handle wolves isn't to reason with them, it's to show them your teeth are sharper. As I stood there, watching soup drip down their shocked faces, I couldn't help but think how my grandfather would have appreciated this moment. Without a word, the housekeeper, bless her understanding of dramatic moments, handed me a frying pan. The cool metal felt familiar in my grip. Alex, trying to prove his bravado, made the mistake of charging at me first. I swung the pan like a tennis pro serving for match point. The satisfying crack of metal meeting face was followed by his howl of pain as he crashed to the floor. The room— "Call the police!" Ben's voice cracked with panic. "He hit someone! Arrest him!" I turned my attention to him, still keeping my foot on Alex. "I hit him, not you. Why so worked up? Eager to see the inside of a police station?" Ben stumbled backward, his earlier bravado evaporating like morning dew. "George, they don't know any better," my mother pleaded, her voice trembling. "Don't argue with them." "They don't know better?" I laughed coldly. "What's your excuse then? You're over 50 and here you are, acting like their trained pet. Did you even think to ask my permission before bringing your illegitimate children home? Or did you think I've gone soft and stopped disciplining you?" My father's anger finally boiled over. "George, she's your mother. How dare you speak to her like that?" The frying pan whistled through the air again, but my father's hand shot up to block it with practiced ease. The movement was so fluid, so automatic. It told a story of years of similar confrontations. He sputtered in rage but didn't dare continue. Some lessons, it seems, had stuck. "Don't make me lose my temper," I warned, before turning my attention to Lily. Gripping her chin, I forced her to meet my eyes. "You better behave too. Don't think being a woman will protect you." The fear in her eyes was almost satisfying. Back in my room, I immediately called my assistant for a situation report. The company, at least, brought better news. No major personnel changes had occurred during my absence. Lily had managed to slip in, but only in an entry-level position. Alex and Ben had been strutting around the offices with my mother like peacocks, but hadn't secured any positions yet. The business was running smoothly, following the strategy I'd laid out before my departure. Both existing operations and new projects were progressing as planned. A weight lifted from my shoulders, but one question remained. What's the shareholders' mood like? After all, in business as in family, it's always good to know where the knives might come from. The company shareholders were like old tigers, experienced, dangerous, and always hungry for more power. They'd tried to push me aside after my grandfather's death, but I'd shown them my own teeth back then. Still, their current silence was deafening. In the business world, sometimes no movement is the biggest movement of all. I spent the afternoon making calls to key business partners, maintaining those delicate relationships that kept the company running. This was exactly why I hated the business world. Endless scheming, constant plotting, always watching your back. Give me a simple life of leisure any day. Evening found me eating dinner alone in my room, but boredom led me to an interesting discovery. The security camera feeds showed an unexpected scene playing out in the media room. 3 figures huddled together. Alex, his face still sporting the impressive bruise from our earlier encounter, Ben, and the supposedly timid Lily. "Don't be scared, Lily," Alex was saying, puffing up with false bravado. "I can protect you." Lily's response shattered her innocent facade like glass. "What you do is your business," she said, her voice sharp as ice. "I'm different from you. You're here for the inheritance, but I'm here for revenge. I don't want a single cent. I just want George dead." She left the room, leaving behind a mystery that piqued my interest. Revenge? Against me? Now this was getting interesting. The scared little mouse from dinner had sharp claws after all. I waited about 10 minutes before making my move. When Lily returned to her room and locked her door, she found me standing behind it like a ghost in a horror movie. Her startled jump was almost comical. She would have screamed if I hadn't covered her mouth in time. So, I said, studying her face, you want me dead? Revenge, is it? Mind explaining what grudge you have against me? The fear in her eyes was real this time, but there was something else too. A flash of calculation as she realized the house must be under surveillance. If you want to talk, just blink, I offered. When she did, those clear eyes of hers were mesmerizing, beautiful but deadly, like a poisonous flower. I released her and made myself comfortable on her bed, patting the space beside me. Come on, let's talk properly. Instead of the outrage or fear I expected, she remained eerily calm. From your reaction, she said thoughtfully, it seems you genuinely don't know what this is about. The predator had become prey in her own den, yet she maintained her composure. Maybe this little revenge plot would turn out to be more entertaining than I thought. So you really have no idea why I want you dead? Lily's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. None whatsoever, I replied honestly. The truth often works better than lies when you're trying to unravel someone else's deception. Your father told me you caused my mother's death, she said, watching my reaction carefully. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. Think about it logically. What possible motive would I have for killing your mother? Your mother was my father's first love, sure. But if anyone would want her dead out of jealousy, wouldn't it be my mother? I leaned forward, warming to my argument. And as you've seen today, I barely care about either of my parents. You're not even my father's biological daughter, so you've never been a threat to me. So tell me, who really benefits most from your mother's death? Lily's face changed as the pieces started falling into place. After my father died, your father stepped in to help with our family business, she said slowly, realization dawning in her eyes. Even though I hold the shares, he controls most of the major projects. My position in your company, it wasn't just for revenge opportunities, was it? It was to keep me under control. Hatred flickered in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. I'll investigate this myself. I can't just take your word for it. If you need help, just ask, I offered, standing to leave. It was almost amusing. My father, the eternal opportunist, would never risk bringing Lily home unless there was serious profit involved. The whole revenge story stank of his manipulation. The next morning, I arrived early at the company. The boardroom filled gradually with directors, each one asking about my 6-month absence with fake concern plastered on their faces. I gave them bland, non-committal answers. No need to show my hand yet. Once everyone was seated, I opened the meeting with my plans for new projects in the second half of the year. But before I could detail anything, Director Lewis, my longtime adversary, interrupted. George, he said, his voice dripping with false concern, as chairman, your frequent absences show a concerning lack of responsibility toward the company and its shareholders. Director Miller jumped in right on cue. The company can't thrive under such leadership. You should step down and let your father take over. Those in favor, raise your hands, Lewis called out, not even trying to hide their pre-planned coup attempt. Miller's hand shot up immediately, followed by several others from their faction. The remaining directors, except for my few loyal supporters, sat back to watch the show unfold. Just then, the boardroom door swung open. The air crackled with tension. This wasn't just another meeting. This was a battlefield. Falling in love, she replied with a sweet smile that carried just enough edge to make everyone uncomfortable. Her performance was masterful. With a few simple words, she had made their accusations look absurd. And about George hitting people, Alex provoked him first. It had nothing to do with food. How can you defend him? Alex exploded, his face turning even redder. Did he threaten you? His confusion was almost comical, the puppet suddenly finding its strings cut. But Director Miller wasn't ready to give up. Everyone knows about George's extreme macho syndrome, he pressed on desperately. We can't have someone mentally unstable running this company. Let's vote. Hands rose across the room, more than before. The tide had indeed turned against me during my absence. My father adjusted his suit with practiced precision before approaching me, his expression unreadable. "Good son," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "You must understand. Wisdom comes with age. The game has changed while you've— Leave, I said with a dismissive wave. I've changed my mind about buying your shares. Instead, I think I'll just watch your family crumble." His face froze in shock as I signaled my assistant. "Bring me Director Lewis's files, especially the ones about his son's drug activities." The color drained from Lewis's face as sweat beaded on his forehead. "George, please," he begged, his earlier bravado evaporating. "Don't go this far. I was wrong. Give me another chance." "Wrong?" I leaned forward, my smile cold. "You're not sorry for being wrong. You're sorry for getting caught. And since you so eagerly volunteered to be an example," I snapped my fingers, and 2 bodyguards stepped forward to restrain him. "Watch him carefully. We wouldn't want our criminal friend trying to escape." The message wasn't lost on the others. They signed their contracts in silence, accepting my suggestions about leaving the city. Within 2 hours, the mess was cleaned up. I was just settling back in my chair when more visitors arrived. My parents, followed by Alex and Ben. Everyone thought they were enemies, but I knew better. Despite their apparent conflicts, they were united by the oldest motivation in the world: profit. The real game was just beginning, and I couldn't help but wonder if any of them realized just how thoroughly they'd underestimated me. The family's true nature was finally clear. While my mother waged war with relatives over family assets, my father acted as her spearhead, and when he tried to wrestle the company shares from me, she worked behind the scenes to help him. They were a perfect pair of vultures, always circling for the kill. Alex couldn't read the room, his eyes fixed on Lily, who stood behind me, her hands resting on my shoulders. "Lily, why are you choosing his side?" he whined. "I've liked you for so long." Lily remained silent, her gentle massage of my shoulders speaking volumes about where her loyalties now lay. I shot Alex a contemptuous look before turning to my mother. "This failure you birthed can't even grasp basic strategy. Too busy playing lovesick puppy when his world's falling apart. Did you forget to give him a brain?" My mother's face drained of color. She shot Alex a look that could freeze hell, barking, "Shut up!" He shrank back like a scolded child, confirming who really held his leash. I lit a cigarette, letting the smoke curl lazily in the air. "You've all seen what I'm capable of. These same tactics can be used against any of you, anytime. Consider this the gentlest version of me you'll ever see." Alex bristled, but Ben held him back. My father just glowered silently, pointing at Lily with a curse. "Ungrateful thing." My mother, ever the pragmatist, softened her tone. "George, once we sell our assets, we'll leave. This will all be over." I nodded, but knew better than to trust them. Sure enough, my father made his move within days. Too scared to challenge me directly, he targeted Lily's companies instead. Several of her key businesses fell under his control as he went for the kill. But he'd forgotten whose grandson I was. My resources dwarfed his. What looked like small, subtle moves on my part systematically dismantled his power base. He spent his days at home, face dark with impotent rage, not daring to speak to me, but hurling abuse at Lily whenever he saw her. The solution was simple. I kept Lily close, even bringing her to my room at night. I won't pretend to be innocent. Within days, she was mine in every sense. The whole family knew. The walls weren't that thick. Director Lewis's fate served as a stark warning. His entire family faced investigation, with serious charges looming on the horizon. The business world buzzed with speculation about their downfall. Through security footage, I discovered Alex and Ben's amateur attempts to dig up dirt on me. They were looking for crimes, but all they found were instances of me hitting my parents and Alex, mere civil disputes that any lawyer would classify as family matters. Their desperation was almost amusing. The game had changed, and they were playing by outdated rules. My grandfather had taught me better than that. The elaborate dinner spread before me reeked of deception. "We're leaving," my mother announced with practiced sadness. "Consider this our farewell dinner." Even my father had softened his tone, claiming he was ready to depart. But I wasn't fooled. A lifetime of suspicion doesn't vanish over one meal. I sat at the table but didn't touch their food. Only Lily's dishes were safe, or so I thought. As I ate what she had prepared, I noticed the others watching me with barely concealed smirks, like wolves watching their prey walk into a trap. Something was wrong. I turned to Lily, questions in my eyes, only to find her mask finally slipping away. "George," she said, her voice as cold as winter frost, "you killed my mother. Did you really think I'd fall for someone with extreme macho syndrome? I got close to you for one reason: revenge." "What the?" The words died in my throat as darkness claimed me. I awoke strapped to a hospital bed, my body betraying me by refusing to move. My parents flanked me like prison guards, while Alex and Ben loomed by the window. My father's face carried that same unreadable expression from the boardroom. "Good son," he said, savoring each word. "Remember what I said about wisdom coming with age? You never saw Lily for what she was, my pawn." Through the drug-induced haze, confusion fought with rage. How did I become her mother's killer? What game are you playing? My father's sneer told me everything. "Of course you didn't kill her. I did, slowly, methodically, with poison." Alex stepped forward, a loyal dog at his master's heel. "Still trying to act tough, George? Have you all lost your minds?" I demanded. "I'm your son. I'm the one who'll take care of you in your old age. Alex is just Mom's bastard. How could he possibly replace me?" My father's laugh was hollow. "You don't understand. Blood ties are weak. But when people commit murder together," he gestured at the group, "that creates the strongest alliance of all. Lily's mother bound us together with her death." "So you all killed her together?" The pieces were finally falling into place. "Yes," my father confirmed with chilling casualness. "Alex and Ben sourced the poison. Your mother arranged the opportunity. I administered it. The perfect family project. But you're right about one thing," he added, almost kindly. "You are my son. I won't let you die. This psychiatric hospital will be your new home, a comfortable prison for the rest of your days." The irony was bitter. I'd spent my life preparing for their betrayal, only to be undone by trusting the one person who had more reason to hate them than I did. The family circle of betrayal was complete. "This is our token of loyalty," my mother declared, wiping away crocodile tears. "Don't blame me for being cruel, George. After all, you weren't raised by us. You have no feelings for us anyway." My father was practically glowing with triumph. "I'm the final winner," he gloated. "Lily poisoned you, and we have evidence. Her assets will be ours. Alex and Ben's father's assets are already in your mother's hands. Everything your grandfather protected will finally belong to us." "The board will never side with you," I shouted through gritted teeth. My father's laughter was cold. "You're dreaming. Director Lewis was right. You pushed too far. Making an example of him? That scared everyone. Now they're all looking for a chance to remove you. The psychiatric hospital is perfect. After all, everyone knows about your extreme macho syndrome." His smile turned serpentine. "Your mother and I made sure those rumors spread far and wide. Now it's only natural for me to take over as chairman." They left me there, strapped to the bed, while they began their victory lap. Over the next few days, they moved quickly, merging Lily's company with the family business, consolidating power, and finally calling a board meeting where my father claimed my grandfather's chair. He stroked the armrest lovingly, admiring how years of use had polished the redwood to a rich gleam. Finally, he breathed. I've made it to this position. Everything depends on planning, my mother purred. Our crazy son only knew violence. Alex, eager to prove his worth, chimed in. We should fire all of George's people immediately. Carefully, Ben cautioned. The core business and key clients are still in their hands. We need to handle this delicately. My father turned to address the board, savoring his moment of triumph. Now that everything is settled, does anyone have anything to say? The boardroom door swung open. Time seemed to freeze as Director Lewis, the man they thought they'd destroyed, walked in and took his seat as if nothing had happened. His smile carried the weight of secrets as he looked at my father. That seat belongs to the chairman. Why are you sitting there? My father's face turned ashen. Aren't you supposed to be locked up? The game wasn't over. It was just beginning its next round. My mother's confident facade cracked. Old Lewis, how did you escape? Director Lewis lit a cigarette with the casual air of a man holding all the cards. Right on cue, I walked into the room, Lily and my assistant following like perfectly positioned chess pieces. The color drained from my parents' faces. How did you get out? My father stammered. That mental hospital? I've known about it since my 6-month absence. My assistant had already infiltrated the management through a careful mix of threats and bribes. Every single person there works for me now. I savored each word. I'm lazy and like to play around, but extreme macho syndrome? Please. Grandfather didn't spend years teaching me just to create another mindless thug. Who's really the fool here? Those 6 months I was away, that was when I laid the groundwork for everything. Every move, every piece, perfectly positioned. I nodded to my bodyguards, who promptly removed my father from my grandfather's chair. I reclaimed my seat, Lily resuming her position behind me, her hands on my shoulders. Truth is, I could have dealt with all of you the day I returned, but learning about Lily's situation made me curious about the full truth. Your little confessions in the mental hospital gave me everything I needed. I watched understanding dawn on their faces like the first light of their last day. From the moment I took office, Director Lewis appeared to oppose me. Everyone expected opposition, so why not from someone on my side? I gestured to my assistant. Meet David, Director Lewis's cousin's son, the one who was kidnapped as a child. You planned this far ahead? My father's voice was barely a whisper. Let me remind you of some history, I continued, watching their faces. When I was 7, you took me to an amusement park where I coincidentally almost got kidnapped. Grandfather's men saved me. At 10, you tried poisoning me with garnish flowers. The room was silent except for the sound of my parents' world crumbling around them. Alex and Ben stood frozen, finally realizing they were mere pawns in a game far beyond their comprehension. I recited their murder attempts like reading from a twisted family album. At 13, the poisoned dish I accidentally knocked over. During Grandfather's birthday, the hunting dog that mysteriously broke loose to attack me. At 18, the truck that tried to crush me during my driving test. If I hadn't jumped clear, I'd be dead. My voice remained eerily calm. From childhood until now, you've tried to kill me countless times. Only a fool wouldn't have planned ahead. I don't know what you're talking about, my father denied, though his face had turned the color of ash. My mother tried her familiar theatrics. George, I gave birth to you. How could I hurt my own child? Every action leaves a trace, I replied coldly. You thought you covered your tracks well, but I've been gathering evidence all along. I watched their faces drain of what little color remained before delivering the final blow. And then there's your other son, 3 years younger than me. Did you think you could fool me as easily as you fooled Alex and Ben? My parents began trembling. My mother fell to her knees, tears flowing. George, you can't hurt your brother. He's your real brother. Even my father's arrogance crumbled. We'll stop fighting. Just Spare my son. I'm your son too, I said with a bitter smile. Having parents like you is worse than having none at all. At least orphans don't have to watch their backs around family. Alex and Ben's faces contorted with fresh betrayal. Mom, you've been using us all along? Alex shouted. We helped you, and this is how you repay us? Ben snarled through gritted teeth. Lily chose this moment to speak up. I've played along with your little performance long enough. Time to face the consequences. She explained how my father's theatrical scolding of her had been pointless. We'd already aligned our plans. The attacks on her company, the entire scheme, had been orchestrated to draw out their confession at the mental hospital. I paused, savoring the moment before delivering the final devastating news. About your precious son, my brother. He's already dead. Don't misunderstand. I didn't kill him. Your spoiling made him bold enough to provoke local gangs overseas. They beat him to death. My mother collapsed in a dead faint. My father broke down in tears. His carefully constructed world shattered completely. As the police led them away, I realized the truth about family. Blood ties mean nothing without trust, and trust means everything without blood. The game was over. I had won, but victory tasted more bitter than sweet. The evidence I'd gathered was ironclad. Death sentences were all but certain. 3 weeks later, I received their final request to see me. They looked haggard in their prison uniforms, but their eyes still burned with familiar hatred. Why don't you just die? My mother's first words spat like venom. You ungrateful child, my father growled. We gave you life, yet you won't submit to us. Why won't you just die? I smiled, calm in the face of their rage. Because I'm going to kill you from the inside. Their words couldn't touch me anymore. They'd tried to break me countless times throughout my life and failed. Why would their desperate curses hurt me now? This final visit wasn't about reconciliation. They wanted to leave me with emotional scars, like those who taunt, "Your mother doesn't love you." But why should I care? My grandfather's love had been enough. He made me the worst kind of person, the kind that survives. I leaned in close, whispering my final psychological twist of the knife. Your son isn't really dead. I lied. I'm going to find him and keep him alive, suffering forever. I savored their reactions. My mother's scream echoed through the prison. My father roared, "You can't do this!" I am doing it, I laughed. What can you do to stop me? Of course, their precious son was actually dead, by his own foolishness, not my hand. But I couldn't resist one last torment. After all, I'm the bad guy they created. Life took an unexpected turn after that. Lily and I married. She stayed by my side, keeping clear of business except to run interference when female clients appeared. Once everything was stable, we became absentee owners, traveling the world together. Years into our marriage, I discovered something that changed everything. While going through old belongings, I found evidence that our first meeting hadn't been chance at all. The small dog at the library, the one I'd waited with until its owner returned, it had been her elaborate plan all along. She'd admired me from afar but had been too shy to approach directly. Now, watching our son Leo play with a puppy, descended from that very dog that brought us together, I feel a warmth I never thought possible. Lily watches them with the same clever sparkle in her eye that planned our first encounter. The machinations of my parents have faded to distant, unpleasant memories, overshadowed by the life we've built. Sometimes the worst circumstances create the strongest people, and sometimes those people find unexpected happiness despite it all, or perhaps because of it all.